poussais, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué, poussais, je t'aime, poussais, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée, poussais, je t'aime, poussais, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show that takes a look at the main stories across Europe and check what's at stake for you and for the continent. I'm Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us for this edition, broadcast from the European Parliament here in Strasbourg, where MEPs met for their very last session of 2023. Coming up this week, time is up Spain. Madrid spent the last 6 months in the EU spotlight, trying to finalise a chunk of legislative files, all while juggling choppy political waters. Freshly ordained Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez was here in Strasbourg Wednesday, reassuring MEPs that he got the job done. We take a closer look and check what's left for the Belgian presidency to pick up in January. And after months of talks, the EU Platform Workers Directive jumped one of its final hurdles this week here in Strasbourg. Lawmakers locked heads late into Tuesday night and sealed a deal on the fate of over 28 million workers across the EU that rely on digital platforms to earn a dime. The crux of the talks was how to classify this work and who should pay for it. A warm welcome to our panel this week. Irish Fine Gael MEP Sean Kelly from the European People's Party.
Thank you, Maeve.
Hungarian MEP Katalin Cseh from Renew Europe.
Hi.
And Polish MEP Robert Biedron from the Socialists.
Hello.
So lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us. But before we bring you in, let's just remind our viewers why Pedro Sánchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, was in Strasbourg this week.
After 6 intense months, Spain's time in the EU spotlight is up. Known as a rotating presidency, Madrid steered the ship, all whilst holding general elections and forming a government. Beyond helping front EU responses to major events like COP28 or the Israel-Hamas war, Spain had to advance files like artificial intelligence, reform of the electricity market and sanctions against Russian diamonds. Marking the presidency, though, the controversial amnesty law that helped Pedro Sánchez get back into office. With a long list of items still left undone, from fiscal rules to a migration pact, all eyes are now on the incoming Belgian presidency in January to finish the job, before the 5-year mandate ends and EU elections take place in June.
So it's been a pretty busy period for Spanish diplomats. They'll really deserve a break after all that. But what has been the word here in the Parliament? Have they got the job done, Robert?
Well, I believe Spanish delivered. There's still much job to do. We are still negotiating around 160 acts, so it's a lot.
160 acts?
Yeah, 160 different documents being negotiated. So far, I was participating yesterday at the committee of the committee chairs, and we were informed about state of play. So much work to deliver. We never ever had so many negotiations going on in this House. But having in regard this very difficult times where we have so many crises, not only war in Ukraine, but the conflict in the Middle East.
Our viewers are well aware. I mean, we've been reporting on all these perma crises.
They delivered on so many areas.
Okay, let's hear from Sean Kelly. Have they delivered? What's the take from the European People's Party?
We're in election mode, so the debate in the Parliament was more about the new government, the rule of law and the amnesty. But the title of the debate was a review of the Spanish presidency. And having been involved in the Irish presidency, particularly at the end of a mandate, how the presidency deals with the files is of crucial importance. And I must give credit particularly to the ambassador, Raúl Fuentes, I think it's pronounced. He did massive work in several files. I was involved in the energy performance of buildings. We had one trilogue which went from 4:30 in the evening to 4 o'clock the following morning. He showed great knowledge, great patience and great diplomacy, and I think he deserves credit for that.
Let's see if Katalin agrees with this take.
Well, I think it's very hard to separate the politics and the policies in this presidency because on the one hand, we really achieved a lot. So, for instance, the EU is the first community ever to have like this massive regulation on AI, which is an absolute breakthrough, or to regulate political advertising, or also to reform the anti-corruption rules, for instance, the financial regulation that I was personally working on. But also, we cannot disregard the fact that this presidency was also marred with very serious political disputes about the rule of law in Spain. And this was an ongoing topic, and I have to say that my group is very worried about the amnesty law and how the coalition formation happened.
Well, we'll come back to that, Kathleen Che, but Pedro Sánchez is not here around the table, but we did just want to show a clip of his speech a little bit earlier this week here in the Parliament to see how he thought he did. Take a listen.
La presidencia española, creo, honestamente...
It has been a successful presidency. I would say that we've had 43 files approved, for instance, more than average. We've achieved significant progress in terms of legislation and policies for the future of Europe. The time has come to look to the future with more ambition and with more optimism, because the EU is facing a challenge now, which is not about avoiding decline. It's not about the development of other regions around the world. We need to be at the forefront of a new era of global prosperity.
Liderar una nueva era de prosperidad global.
So a very positive take there from Pedro Sánchez, pretty much confident that him and his team, he was able to get the job done. But as you said there, the presidency was marked as well by the whole amnesty. We've seen a lot of controversy as well inside the European Parliament, a lot of divisions.
But, you must understand that Spanish face the national elections, and they deliver also a lot of hopes for you. I come myself from Poland, and the victory of Pedro Sánchez for Polish people and combating radical right-wing populism in Spain brought a lot of hopes for Europe, and that we can combat the radical right wings. And so we should regard it also from this angle. Imagine that in Spain we would have now radical right-wing populism in government. That would be another troublemaker besides Orban. I'm sorry, Kathleen, but this is the European reality today. So we should look at it also from this perspective, that imagine there is no Pedro Sánchez anymore, and you need to deal with other troublemakers. What would happen for Europe?
Well, it was a shock, I guess, for your political group that Pedro Sánchez is actually in power, because Feijóo would have been your man.
Absolutely. And it was a pity we didn't have kind of two debates. One, the review of the Spanish presidency, which in terms of the files, etc., they did a great job. Then the other, in terms of what's happening in Spain now. And my group, and particularly my Spanish colleagues and many more, are very concerned about how Sánchez is putting his government together, and particularly the rule of law and the amnesty. And they feel that it's power at any price, and that's not a good thing for democracy. So we'll just have to see how it pans out. But there were real strong feelings right throughout my group, the EPP, in relation to this, and they articulated them in Parliament today, particularly by our chairman, Manfred Weber.
Well, look, you mentioned Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. I mean, his name came up a lot this week, Kathleen Che, of course, because the Commission took that decision to unlock those much-discussed 10 billion euros in funds for Hungary in return for the Hungarian government signing up to major issues like unlocking funding for Ukraine and also triggering the membership talks. What is your take on all this, Kathleen Che, your groups?
Well, Pedro Sánchez is actually very right in the segment that we've shown that we have to combat new challenges also. And I would consider democratic backsliding here. And Hungary is unfortunately leading the way, but it's not the only country. And the fact that the European Commission has decided to unlock money to Hungary without the proper completion of the necessary requirements, it is extremely worrying, particularly because I feel that they gave into the blackmail of Viktor Orban, who basically threatened to block any action on Ukraine or on the budget, basically acting as the Trojan horse at the EU's negotiating tables. And this is why it is disturbing to see also other bad signs in Europe. So, for instance, the Slovak election, and I have to add, unfortunately, a little bit, the Spanish amnesty law here also, because, of course, I'm very happy that the extreme right is not in government in Spain. But the fact that you make a deal with a party for forming a government and in return providing a sweeping amnesty to...
Well, let's just go back to Viktor Orban, because, I mean, as this funding was being unlocked, Sean Kelly, there's posters with the face of Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, all across Budapest, saying that we will not dance this dance. So anti-EU posters that have been put up with Hungarian money, perhaps also EU money, and yet the Commission has unlocked that funding, saying that they have to abide by the rules.
Yeah, I must say, I think it's shocking in many respects that one Prime Minister can basically hold the rest of the European Union to ransom. Yeah. And it's going to lead to a huge rethink in regard to unanimity voting and the veto. Now, that's a controversial issue, but if there's any example of why we have to change some of the rules, Viktor Orban is the example. Because, as you said, if you were to get 2 or 3 more prime ministers like that, the European Union would become dysfunctional. And I think it would have been better if the Commission held a line and showed all of Europe that one individual, obnoxious and selfish as he is, can get away with it, and then go back to his own country and say how great he is and start criticising not the European Union institutions, he called it Brussels. Now, Brussels is a city and not the European institutions.
Yeah, Brussels should not play the dirty games with Orban, definitely. And I say it coming from Poland, we were facing also very radical populist government, and the only hope we had sometimes was European Union, that European Union will not cross this line to feed the authoritarian regime. And at the end of the day, I cannot imagine the taxpayers in Ireland or in France with agree of feeding Orban's government. I cannot imagine that people will be agreeing on this procedure which will be not transparent for the taxpayers to give the public funds for a guy who is not respecting the fundamental rights.
Well,
so,
a lot of our viewers are concerned as well, because I think 4 parties here in the Parliament sent a letter as well saying they do not agree with that funding being locked. We've seen a number of NGOs from Transparency as well International saying that it's disgraceful, it's catastrophic. But here we are in December 2023 with the Commission still bowing perhaps to Viktor Orban. But look, let's get back to the Spanish presidency, because we were also curious to see beyond the EU institutions and beyond politics how actual Spaniards felt about being in the limelight of the European Union for the last 6 months. So we asked Jaime Velasquez, that's our correspondent over in Madrid, to send us an update.
The government of President Pedro Sánchez had been preparing for months to take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union. It was supposed to be the crowning moment of his term, but an inconclusive snap election in June and 4 subsequent months of political stalemate have overshadowed Pedro Sánchez's European semester, while the Spanish caretaker government was trying to forge an agreement on the European Union migration policy or the reform of the electricity market. Spaniards were simply too busy with their own problems to take care about what was going on in Brussels. The negotiations to form a new government and the controversial amnesty law for those involved in the Catalan independence bid in 2017 had led the European presidency to go virtually unnoticed in Spain.
Jaime Velasquez there reporting for us from Madrid. Robert, you were laughing there, or I don't know if you were crying, because this is clearly a missed opportunity for Spain as well.
Yeah, well, I was crying because we're still not able to deliver all those important things we are working on. During the Spanish presidency, so much happened, and Kathleen was mentioning some of that. We really delivered a lot of practical things for Europeans, and that still people are not able to see that it's our common failure. And I think we should also...
A common failure that needs to be addressed soon, because it's also worth pointing out there's just 6 months left of this 5-year mandate, and then it is election time. Then people will go and vote and decide who they want to see in this European Parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. It is our job, I think, to show to the people what we were working on, that we could deliver on the crucial issues that were very important to the voters, on the Green Deal, on individual rights, on women's rights, on the reform of the European Union. And I have to say I'm very proud of this Parliament and how well we reacted on the many crises that came. And I really hope that also the Conservatives realize that in the coming months, sustaining the ambition of the Green Deal is very important, because we did so much together in the first half. And I don't know what happened in the EPP. Maybe, Sean, you can tell me. But in the last months, it feels like you are just like blowing up the whole thing and like putting everything into jeopardy.
And that is what's making the headlines here, Sean Kelly. I mean, not the policies, but actually the politics and the name-calling and the theatre that we're seeing in the European Parliament, especially by your group and your leader, the German man, Manfred Weber. What's going on?
Well, they had reservations about some of the legislation. But I took a different view, I have to say.
Just tell our viewers, like the nature restoration law.
The nature restoration law was something that I wanted to finish and kill.
Pesticides.
My group, my delegation, we didn't agree with that, and we defied our group, and others came with us. And as a result of that, the nature restoration law was passed. Now I think, though, as a result of the negotiations under the Spanish presidency, that we now have got a compromise, which I would hope that my group will be able to support as well. And I think that would be very important. But if I and my delegation didn't stand up for what we thought was right, it would have been defeated in Parliament, which unfortunately my group wanted to do.
And what happens when you stand up for your view? How does Manfred Weber treat you?
You get a little bit of hassle, and some people get very angry with you. I got some abuse in the corridors from individuals. But I just told them I wasn't taking any notice of that. I always do what I think is right. My group did, my delegation did what was right, and I think we were probably proven right in the end. And as a result, the nature restoration law, which would have been killed, will now become law, and that's very important. And
but meanwhile,
for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the majority didn't support that in my group. But we got it over the line, and now as a result of the negotiations under the Spanish presidency, we have EPPD, which I think my group will be able to support, and the Parliament, and that'll be good for the Green Deal.
And I have a feeling that when we talk this way, people don't understand what we deliver, because the nature restoration law is about protecting the globe and people against the climate catastrophe we are facing. And people should have it delivered. They're asking for that. And when we are going into these political disputes, debates, the show, the people,
well, especially people from the same political group, the same political family, when they're not getting on and they're like killing each other verbally. Yeah. That's the image that stays really in people's minds of the European Parliament.
Because we are really doing great things for people. We are trying to protect them against these all catastrophes we might face, including the climate catastrophe.
But that's not really how people feel, right, on the ground. I mean, we saw there Spaniards didn't notice their presidency. The Belgians perhaps might notice it a bit more because, of course, they're the home to the EU institutions. But the reality is presidencies come and go and people don't really notice. They don't feel them.
Well, I hope that at least they feel the results of the work that we are doing, because let's face it, like right now, at this very moment, I think the European Union is world leader in terms of the fight against climate change. And of course, we should be doing much more. But I think we delivered a lot. And for our group, for the Liberal group, this has been a core issue from the beginning. And I'm very glad to hear that Sean did not think that what the nature restoration law wants to kill Santa Claus or what was put on the socials, because this is really a common fight for the future of the planet, for the future of our kids. And this is like so obvious, so
we
basic.
all suffer because of it. Yeah. So it's our common goal to fight against this catastrophe.
And we don't have a lot of time, but just on the EU fiscal rules, I know this is something of big importance for our viewers, and we saw thousands of people take to the streets earlier this week in Belgium calling for no austerity and fair rules. Last week, Sean Kelly, there was like 12 hours of talks, I think, with finance ministers. They didn't manage to get a deal. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of divisions between the hawks, you know, countries like Germany, countries like the Netherlands versus countries like France and Italy who want to see more flexibility. Where do you stand on this?
This is the nature of politics. And everything in the European Union, first of all, because of the size of it and the way we vote, which we mentioned a while ago there, is slow. But at the end of the day, we usually get it right. That has been the case in relation to COVID. It has been the case in relation to the Repower EU in Ukraine. And I think the same will happen here. Yep. And by and large, we do get the budgets that we need, but it always takes time. But until we look at how we actually do business more efficiently, this is going to continue into the future. And especially if we're talking about enlargement, the rules we have now, how will they be fit for purpose if you have 36 member states?
Well, that's a whole other topic we will come back to. And indeed, this week was also that Western Balkan summit. But for now, I'm afraid we'll have to take a little break. But we'll have more on the Belgian priorities in January. But for now, stay with us, because after the break, we'll be telling you about a massive breakthrough here in Strasbourg this week for gig workers' rights. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly talk show where we're taking a look at the big news headlines out of Strasbourg this week. And one of them was a late-night deal to give more rights to gig workers. Known as the Platform Workers Directive, it would mean millions of Uber drivers, delivery riders could be seen as employees and have the right to a pension, paid sick leave and workplace accident insurance. Once official, the directive would be written into national law of all EU countries, replacing the patchwork of laws in place today. MEPs working on the law for the past 3 years called the deal this week historic, the first ever act, in fact, that deals with the labour market of the future. So what was your reaction here to this?
I'm very happy. It's a historic, but also a first in the world agreement on this important issue, because we are dealing in European Union itself with 30 million people. It's like population altogether of Greece, Portugal and Sweden. And we will be dealing soon with the population of in Spain. So it's important that online workers, we have the same protection as the offline workers.
And gig workers, Robert Bielan, are set to, of course, increase as well in the future. This has been hailed as well historic and welcomed by the trade unions. They say it might put an end to this wild, wild west, quote, of lack of labour rights for workers in this gig economy. Catherine Shea, your reaction?
Well, of course, it's amazing, but also I think this is the basic minimum we should be providing to workers in Europe. These are European values: to have a right for social protection, to a fair wage, to be treated fairly. This is why I am so proud to be European, and I'm very glad that we managed to achieve this breakthrough for so many people. And I'm really, really proud of the negotiating team, because they did an amazing job and we really helped.
And they didn't get much sleep, did they, this week? They were up, I think it was 12 hours of negotiations. Yes. But of course, this still has to get ratified by EU member states and get the official seal, and then it will take perhaps 2 years to come into force. Sean Kelly, your reaction?
Yeah, I think this is an example again of things that happen here in Europe that people aren't aware of until they're actually done. And as you said, it took 3 years, it had to be initiated, and it's establishing fair play and also responding to the new age. We were also the first to bring in the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. It became the global standard. The same here. A lot of workers, 30 million, as has been said, hadn't rights. They were often treated as self-employed. Now we have said at European level, this is not good enough. We're going to change it, and we've done it. And while we saw there, a lot of people mightn't be aware of what's happening in Europe, when they see this and other examples of it, they can see that it's probably the only vehicle by which changes of this nature can be made, and then they can be applied not just within the member states, will probably eventually apply worldwide.
OK, well, look, to hear another perspective from someone who's been following this file closely, we checked in with the employment lawyer, Colin Leckie. He's a partner at Lewis Silkin, and he actually represents a number of gig economy clients over in Silicon Valley.
Fundamentally, the dial will shift from an employment rights perspective towards those individuals working through platforms who will be more likely to be classified as employees as a result. I am concerned that this is sort of over-regulation, and there is a danger here that the EU could, to some degree, throw the baby out with the bathwater if they end up in a position where operating in that very flexible way that we associate with the platform economy becomes so difficult that, you know, these sort of newer, flexible job opportunities just become less available to EU workers than they are at present because of where the directive ultimately lands.
So a different perspective there from that employment lawyer, Colin Leckie. He's worried about over-regulation. I mean, Uber, of course, has expressed their dislike as well of this directive. They say that it will lose the flexibility of these workers and they might have to move out of small towns.
Of course, Uber will complain because Uber wants to profit. I just remind you that in the last 4 quarters of the last year, Uber earned $1 billion. They earn $1 billion. Can they provide the proper protection of their employees? Of course they can, but they don't want, because if they don't deliver that, they just simply earning more. So we should find the ways, and we did find the ways, to marry the new economy with the proper protection of employees, because those people are employees. It's about their dignity and the fair social treatment. This is what we did in the House, and my colleagues negotiating this act, they were saying constantly that they face very aggressive lobbying from the side.
Well, also because the companies are concerned. I mean, at the end of the day, they will have to cough up more. They will have to provide more rights.
But they reach enough. They can afford.
They can afford it. Well, look, Nicholas Schmidt as well, the European Commissioner for Jobs, he was in Strasbourg this week. He was one of the men who was up very late here on Tuesday night. He's been speaking to the Financial Times, actually. He gave them an interview and he said that, look, the price of our Ubers will go up by perhaps 40%, and that people are actually ready to bear that cost, in his opinion, that you cannot rely on goodwill and tipping, that there's a real cost that needs to be paid.
I think any business model that is not able to accommodate normal fair wages for people who work 8, 9, 10 hours, normal social protection, then these are not good business models, probably. And I think for us, this is a basic foundation of our European values, to treat people fairly. So yes, of course, I'm happy to pay more. And every single change in labor laws, which gave people more freedom and a healthier working environment, yes, maybe it has costs, but this is why I'm proud to be European, that we can do that.
So Kathleen Shea is proud to be European and happy to pay more. We wanted to know if Euronews viewers would be happy to pay more as well, so we asked them on social media. And in fact, if you look at our poll there, the majority said absolutely, we would pay more for our Uber Eats, we would pay more for our Uber driver if in return they got better rights. But they also added in brackets that they also think the companies should bear the costs. I mean, Sean Kelly, how will this go down in a country like Ireland, which is very pro-business and also the home of a lot of these big tech companies?
I think everybody respects that workers have rights. And when they were being classified as self-employed and they weren't, and they didn't have rights, such as pension rights, etc., when that is explained to people, they'll understand it. There may be a price to be paid for it in terms of having to pay a bit more, but also I think that needs to be monitored so that the Ubers of this world, etc., don't pass on all the costs to the consumer. And in relation to regulation, I think the American attitude, they had the exact same for the data protection regulation. I was a rapporteur for that. But how did it pan out? It has panned out overall quite well.
OK.
And I think the same here in this regard.
OK, thank you so much for your perspective. Thanks as well to Kathleen Shea and to Robert Biedron. And thank you so much for watching. We'll have more on that directive for you as it gets sealed and gets ratified in all the EU member states. But for now, thank you so much again to our panellists. And thank you so much for watching. Stay with us here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekend talk show. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this weekend we're coming to you from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where MEPs awarded the prestigious Sakharov Human Rights Prize to Mahsa Amini and the Woman, Life, Freedom Movement of Iran. Mahsa Amini was the 22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman who died last September in the hands of Iran's religious police for breaching the strict dress code for women. Her death sparked outrage across Iranian civil society and Iranian diaspora across the world and initiated that movement. So this is a pretty symbolic gesture here, but I guess everyone's asking as well, what more can the EU do to help the Iranians, Kathleen?
I have to say that it was truly an honour and pleasure and really fantastic for me to see these brave women, these brave people in the House of European Democracy. And when I had the opportunity to talk to them, to attend a reception, of course, I was really eager to hear what they can say us, what we can do more. And honestly, they told us that it is very nice they really appreciate it, but we should do more. And they asked me the question that why cannot the EU sanction the IRGC? That what we have been calling for in Parliament. And honestly, I didn't have an answer. I have no idea why Joseph Borrell didn't make this move, why we cannot sanction those who are really responsible for all this violence, brutality and killings. This is the task we have to do as soon as
Well, let's just
possible.
meet one of the women that was here actually this week to pick up that award, because of course the family of Mahsa Amini could not come. They were banned by the Iranian authorities. So it was collected by Afsoon Najavi. She's the sister actually of a victim of the Iranian regime, and Euronews had the chance to ask her what more she wanted from Europe.
We received a number of requests, but I'll deal with the most important one. The first one is that the families of the people in government and those responsible in the high positions in Iran, their children are allowed to come and educate themselves outside Iran, providing them visas and kind of an environment to come and further their lives, whereas that embargo, that kind of a sanction should be put on them. Exactly the limitations and the lack of freedom that is put for the Iranian people, and Europe does not deal with them the way the Iranian authorities deal with the Iranian people. The same treatment should be given to them.
The words of Afsoon Najavi there. Sean Kelly, do MEPs have any sort of clout here?
I think we do. And it was interesting that what you said, because firstly I think Afghanistan and Iran must be the two worst countries in the world to be a woman. Some of the delegation came to our group and they mentioned words like brutal, evil, horrible, etc. But one of the points they made in relation to sanctions, and I think she reiterated that as well, it's not financial sanctions. She said the financial sanctions were actually hurting the people. But it's actually targeting the regime who are responsible for this brutal treatment of women in this day and age. I mean, killing some girl because she didn't wear a headscarf to suit them. It's just outlandish.
Robert?
Who, if not us? Europe and European Union should take global leadership in protecting human rights, fighting for human rights. And we should also be very strong on standardization of human rights, that every girl, every woman, wherever she lives globally, she's protected against violence, protected against any harassment. And we should lead also by example. Again, I come from Poland, and you know we had the de facto ban on abortion, where women were dying, where there were so-called pregnancy lists, where prosecutor and police was investigating. So it's also up to us that we do not lose our credibility, that we maintain our values, and we remember that this struggle is continuous.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Robert Biedra. I'm afraid we are out of time. But thank you so much for being with us here. Thank you so much as well to Kathleen Che and to Sean Kelly as well. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much to you for tuning in. For more details on anything you heard here or on the outcomes of the EU summit, do take a look at euronews.com and get in touch with us if you want. You can drop a line to brusselsmylove@euronews.com with any of your comments or stories that you'd like us to look into. But for now, take care and see you soon here on Euronews.